Thanks for listening to this podcast of Trending with Timmerie. If you haven't already subscribed, please catch us wherever you love to listen to your podcast, from the relevant radio app to Apple, YouTube, you name it, we are there. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to go and give us a 5-star review to help other people discover the podcast. Anything you share in terms of episodes, whether it's texting it to a friend, posting on social media, helps to build up the kingdom for God, to help confront the challenging issues we face as a culture, but with joy, with hope, and with an eternal perspective where our faith collides with everyday life, bringing eternal principles to help us live our life joyfully.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio.
It's Gentleman's Hour today on Trending. It is great to be with you. Any question goes as usual. Questions you maybe have always wanted to ask about women. And in fact, I'm going to hear from you today. Many people have been responding on social media. What is one thing you would like to share that you value about women? I would love to hear from you. Also, Eminem has gone woke, and I'm not talking about the singer, songwriter, the rapper. I'm talking about M&Ms, because M&Ms can change their appearances. I think this is absolutely hilarious and actually somewhat helpful to see as Eminem goes woke in 2022. It's comical, and they've kind of, pushed things under the rug here and there with their wokeness, but this is a whole new level. Now, as things ramp up, as we approach the Olympics, women's sports, well, what I thought used to be women's sports, has become increasingly controversial as we see transgender individuals, that is men identifying as women, insisting on playing in women's sports. And it made me ask this question. While men are unfairly allowed to compete in women's sports at the highest levels, I wonder what spaces men want back that women have stepped into. And why should they be men only again? You're listening to Trending with Timmerie here on Relevant Radio. The number's 1-888-914-9149. I would love to take your questions, comments. It's Gentleman's Hour. Any question goes. And we're going to take some fascinating questions that have already come in, such as, what's a deal breaker when it comes to dating and a future marriage? I can tell you my advice. I can tell you what's a deal breaker for me. Maybe it's different for other women, but there are some key ones I think are very helpful for helping guide through the dating areas, but also entering into marriage and staying that marriage material even when you are married. So important. So as I mentioned before, and by the way, if you have a question or comment, would love to take it either via phone, 1-888-914-9149, or you can ask now via Instagram Live. Follow me at Timmerie. That's Timmerie. Okay, so Eminem has gone woke. This has absolutely cracked me up. Okay, so apparently high heels, sneakers, and no longer referring to yourself as Miss can totally change your identity and be more inclusive. Isn't chocolate supposed to be fluid and smooth to begin with? So I don't understand why we actually have a problem with chocolate just becoming more fluid. I mean, they are little characters after all. You know what I mean when I say fluid? People talk today about how gender is fluid and changeable. Well, chocolate melts. It's changeable. It's reshapeable. The human person, no matter what you do to the human person, can't just be changed that way. And I was actually reminded by this with the new Eminem Gone Woke campaign. This is great. Eminem, again, can remake themselves because they're human inventions. They're characters in an ad to sell candy. Just making sure that we all know this. So here's the deal. Apparently, the brown and green M&M, which if you didn't know this are the female M&Ms, are changing, effective immediately, part of their identity. While they are still females, although some comments have been made that apparently the females might be a little gay as well. There have been some ads about that in the past. But the brown M&M will no longer go by Miss Brown, to emphasize the fact that there's more personality emphasis over gender. Also, brown M&M, although she wears heels, apparently we're still allowed to call her she. This is a good thing. Those high heels will be lower and more professional. This is hilarious because what it's saying is we're going to continue to set standards on women for what we think women should be in the professional workforce. Yet at the same time, we live in a culture where women are expected to totally disrespect themselves in terms of what they're required to do to get ahead and how they're expected to dress a lot of the time. I was just talking to my mom about this. There's a whole reality TV show about real estate agents. And we were talking about how all of these real estate agents, we're going to have to talk about this another day, are expected to basically make that sex appeal. Sex sells, wearing these pieces of clothing that are totally inappropriate. It's so funny that here we are seeing Eminem insisting on, being careful to not call the brown Eminem Miss Brown, to emphasize personality over gender, and that we're lowering the heels a little bit because that's going to help solve the world's problems surrounding identity, feminism, you name it. It's laughable. And here's the deal. Eminem is also altering their green M&M, which is the other female Eminem. So, and when I'm talking about M&Ms, I'm talking about the candy. So the green M&M, we've all seen the ads for years trying to sell M&Ms. They can be pretty funny. Some of them are grumpy, some of them are sassy. Well, the green M&M, effective immediately, will no longer be wearing high-heeled boots. Not because that's sexist, because again, they want to be more inclusive. So they're swapping them out for sneakers. Hey, I'm wearing sneakers right now. That's great. Perhaps for some reason I'll identify more with an M&M. Maybe tomorrow I will identify as an M&M. This is ridiculous. This proves the point that you cannot change your gender. This proves the reality of the human person. M&Ms can be remade. Because they're human inventions. Chocolate can be reshaped. It can be dyed. Hey, you can even dye it and put your name on it for your wedding if you want. Also, the M&M characters in the actual commercials, those can also be remade as well, just as we're seeing Eminem doing now. Again, I'm talking about the candy, not the wrapper. M&Ms are just characters in an ad to sell candy, or they are a candy. People cannot change the reality of who they are as male or female. You see, the human person has a nature, a biology, a sex, a physiology, a physique. All of these things have limits. Some simple examples. Although we were just talking about candy, let's talk about the reality. The human person as a whole, when we engage in using hormonal contraception as women for our bodies, what happens? Well, contraception eventually leads to the deterioration of the body. We completely alter the biochemical makeup, whether one day impacts us with off hormones when it comes to menopause, making menopause more difficult, and also prevents us from having children, not just when we don't want to have them, but also when we want to have them as well. Talk about totally irregular hormones leading us to be more moody, tendency toward blood clotting, stroke, and so many things I could go into, but I won't go there because, again, apparently we're just like M&Ms and we can change things so easily. Not. Again, people think they can go through with so-called sex gender affirmation surgeries. These so-called gender affirmation surgeries, previously known as sex changes, which are also conducted by plastic surgeons, well, those are actually impacting and causing irreversible damage to men and women's bodies who go through with this. Again, people try to say that we can make ourselves whatever we want to be. But then there's, a little more serious, but also all of this very serious, the reality that when you try to engage with someone of the same sex with regard to intimacy, there are major medical problems. Friction in areas that shouldn't occur, causing serious damage to the body. Sexually transmitted diseases, leaving the body to be more vulnerable because things are happening in a way the body wasn't meant to work. For example, if I take a gas pump and try to pump my car with gas, but put it into the wrong part of the into the wrong part of the car and not the gas pump, well, guess what? What if I try to put it into where the engine is and flood the engine? My car is not going to work anymore. This is literally what's happening with our bodies today. From sex changes to contraception to, yes, gay you know what. I'm just being clear for a moment here that we understand that we can't keep telling anyone, but especially young people, this lie. That you can remake your alias, appearance, have a surgery, do whatever you want, and be this new you. Whether it be through cross-sex hormones, a sex change, whether it be through a contraceptive version of yourself, whether it be by by living a life where you're attracted to the same sex. The body's not created for this. There are ramifications. You see, we even see young people not even going this far, though, and this is how bad the existential crisis of our time is. When I talk about an existential crisis has to do with not understanding our purpose, our existence, our creator to begin with. Who are we? Where do we come from? What were we made for? If we don't understand those things, we're going to get it wrong. So we see this, for example, with young people who perhaps live a lifestyle on social media that they suddenly don't want to live anymore. They want to portray themselves as something else. So what do? They can, one, delete their old social media profile and create a new one. Or they could keep the same social media profile, take off all the photos, change the bio, and boom, all of a sudden, they're a boy. Ellen Page, the actress from Juno, also Umbrella Academy, right? All these different shows. I mean, very famous actress. Now identifies as Elliot Page. We can name any number of other people. They think that suddenly, if they change their Wikipedia page and social media, they suddenly become that. We also see this with Leah Thomas, who thinks by putting on a swimsuit and taking some estrogen and some things to block his testosterone, that suddenly that makes him worthy to compete with the girls. How about we stop reducing all of this going on in the culture to such a confusion and a lie about remaking yourself? Tomorrow here on Trending, I'm going to be joined by Dr. Kadaris. He's the author of a book called Glow Kids. He's a top researcher on the impact of how technology impacts us today. And we're going to be talking about the metaverse and how all of this plays and impacts us in the metaverse. Because again, the metaverse is yet again just another alias. Doesn't have to be you. You can remake yourself as whatever you want. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie here on Relevant Radio. Again, we are talking about M&Ms, and what this all reminded me of as we were talking about M&Ms, the candy, green and brown, trying to make themselves a little more gender inclusive, a little bit more gender fluid even. What it reminds me of is how, as a culture, we have to remember that we are called, especially as people of faith, to value the human person, especially women, for more than just their looks. The fact that Eminem is literally just changing high heels to be a little lower and high-heeled boots to some sneakers means that we're still getting the whole idea of what it means to be a woman wrong. That we're still just focusing on fashion and looks. And St. John Paul II, St. John Paul the Great, in his fantastic letter, Mulieris Dignitatem, a letter to women, reminded us that women must be valued for the fullness of their feminine genius. Yes, for their motherhood. Yes, for their beauty. But go deeper. For our gifts, for our talents, for our opinions, for the entire embodiment of who we are as women and who we are as men. This is at the heart of cutting through the crisis of existentialism, identity disorders, the identity crisis, and answering and seeing that we as individuals have incredible gifts and value to bring to the world. And perhaps many of these people who are struggling with this identity crisis are just people who feel like they've never actually been seen. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie here on Relevant Radio. It's Gentleman's Hour on Trending, and all of this crisis surrounding Eminem the Candy changing how they portray women in their Eminem characters, I still can't believe we're talking about this. Made me really think, what do men actually admire about women beyond what they wear, how high their high heels are, and sneakers? We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Would love to hear from you. You can share your comments now on social media, especially Instagram. Follow me at Timmerie, that's Timmerie, or the number's 1-888-914-9149. Any question goes. We have some great questions coming in today during Gentleman's Hour. And I do have the question, what male spaces have maybe been infringed upon by women that you wish you had back as men? And please tell me why. We'll be right back here on Trending. Today's show is sponsored by Kolbe Academy. With more than 40 years of experience in Catholic home education, Kolbe Academy offers a blend of classical Catholic curriculum and the latest educational technology. More info at relevantradio.com/Kolbe.
We're talking about what you're thinking about. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
What do you think about the metaverse? Our future? Yes, no. Tomorrow joining me will be Dr. Nicholas Carderas. He's an Ivy League educated psychologist, and he's even taught neuropsychology at the doctoral level. He's the author of a book called Glow Kids. I interviewed him a couple weeks ago talking about how screen addiction is hijacking our kids and how to break the trends. You can check out that podcast. We'll include a link to it in the podcast notes for today's show, relevantradio.com/trending to subscribe and grab those notes or wherever you catch your podcasts. But I'm really looking forward to the conversation because is the metaverse our future? Yes, no, what do you think? We'll touch on that. But today, right now, is Gentleman's Hour here on Trending. Any question goes. If you have a question, I'd love to hear from you. The number is 1-888-914-9149, or you can ask it live now on Instagram at Timmerie. That's Timmerie for my handle to follow me. Okay, I threw the question up on social media, and the question was this: what do men actually think about women that they would like to share? Perhaps something that they really admire. We live in a culture where, unfortunately, I think as women, we tend to be so dehumanized and torn down, and it begs the question and challenges us as a culture to think about more than just our own beauty as women, and for men to think about more than just physically objectifying us. And so I really appreciated many of the responses we received, and I wanted to share a few of them with you. And it's not too late to share and comment on social media. I'd still highly value your opinion. You can comment live sharing on Instagram too. We'll share your thoughts. But again, the question is, what is one thing you would like to share that you value about women? And Francisco on Twitter commented saying it's humility. Humility is what he admires so greatly and deeply about women. James on Twitter said patience, the patience women have. Steven on Instagram said modesty. And I loved that he said that because we so often reduce modesty to the clothes that we wear. But remember, really, modesty actually does encompass this element of humility and patience that Francesco and James both just shared as well about what they admire about women. Because modesty in of itself is actually the opposite of pride, of self-centeredness. That's why modesty has to do with how we speak, how proud we are of ourselves. There's nothing wrong with being proud, but there is something wrong with being prideful. And so to see that these are some of the things that men admire about women. Mr. Burke on Instagram said he got two things: the amazing ability that women have to create life, and then also the natural ability women have to be mothers. Sleepwink on Instagram said he admires women's beauty. All of these elements dive deeper into understanding and appreciating who women are. Humility, patience, modesty. Yes, beauty, but beauty penetrating to the beauty of the whole person. The way we function, the way we act, not just the way we move and stand and how we're dressed. I also appreciated the comment, the amazing ability for a woman to create, to grow life, and then naturally be a mother. This actually comes to a question we received this hour, and we're going to come to it in just a little bit. How and why is it that women so much more naturally and easily can come around to just diving right into motherhood and transition into motherhood, versus it can, for some men, the idea of having kids takes a little longer, or even once you have children, it can take a hot minute. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit during our Gentleman's Hour here on Trending. But what all of this reminded me of was actually a quote from the Venerable Fulton Sheen. And what it reminds me of is how the admiration a man has for a woman should change you as a man. You see, the admiration men have for women should change men. This is summarized in a quote from Venerable Fulton Sheen. He says, "When a man loves a woman, he has to become worthy of her. The higher her virtue, the more noble her character. The more devoted she is to truth, justice, goodness, the more a man has to aspire to be worthy of her." He says the history of civilization could actually be written in terms of the level of its women. I think, and I really do believe, even in the face of radical feminism, abortion culture, and many of the things that people could complain about with regard to women, there are a lot of incredible women in society today. Yes, there are some that can be difficult, but I really do believe we still have incredible human beings living, breathing, walking on this earth. I think part of the problem is that men, I want to encourage you and call you to cut through that gift of loving, appreciating, and respecting the female body, and let it be a means, an opportunity to see individual women and value them for who they are, their gifts, their talents, as a whole person, not just as a compilation of body parts and what we look like as women. I think as a culture, if we can see that there are still valuable people in the world, if we can see the value of others, if we can cut through the struggle, yes, to objectify and lust after women, that actually there's an incredible opportunity here. That through the pondering of individual women that you encounter, you will then see that you are challenged and called to aspire to be worthy of the women you're surrounded by. And if you perhaps think that you don't have any women in your life that you can admire and ponder in a more virtuous way beyond lust, perhaps you need to change your circumstances. Perhaps you need to change your environment. Again, I mentioned earlier, our culture does have incredible women. But are we being pondered, that is us women, for more than just body parts? This is difficult in a pornified culture. This is difficult when even we as women can fail at asking you to look at something other than our bodies. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago on Trending, and I hope, gentlemen, that you will really take this to heart, and that you will teach this to your sons, teach this to your daughters, and that us women will take this to heart. Even when we struggle with the way we dress as women, even when we dress in a more provocative way, even when we might wear something that says, "Here, see me, I'm easy." Ultimately, it's not that we want our bodies to be taken by other people. It's that we want to be seen, we want to be known, we want to be loved, we do want to be admired, but not just for what we're wearing and how we look, but for who we are as individual women. This is a huge part of the reason why we as women struggle with modesty. We want to show our beauty, but we sometimes show our beauty in the wrong way, and we reduce it just to bodily looks. And so as we come back to this incredible quote by the Venerable Fulton Sheen, he reminds us yet again that a man has to aspire to be worthy of women, and he does this by seeing her value and seeing her virtue in a culture. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie here on Relevant Radio. It's our weekly Gentleman's Hour. Any question goes. I'd be happy to take your questions. The number's 1-888-914-9149. We have tons of questions coming in on social media. Things such as, what's the deal breaker? Let's actually take this question now. Okay, question came in. What was a deal breaker for you? And what is not, or was not, when it came to dating? Okay, so I am married. I know someone called a couple weeks ago asking me to, like, travel on a yacht somewhere, like, to a remote island. Like, thank you, I'm married. So if you call and ask about that, where were we supposed to go? It was somewhere interesting. I should have said yes, but I'm bringing my husband and child. Okay, so what were deal breakers for me when it came to dating? This is a really good question, and I would love to hear on social media, women, if you have some thoughts for what deal breakers there were. And maybe you found yourself in a relationship, gentlemen, where a woman broke off a relationship with you, and it was kind of a slap in the face of like, hey, I need to pony up. I need to get my life together. Okay, so deal breakers, for me, I think some of the obvious ones for a lot of people, I'm not a fan of smoking, like regular smoking. I get it. A lot of men like to engage with and enjoy a cigar, a pipe. That's fine. Even perhaps an occasional cigarette. But frequent drinking and frequent smoking, just not cool. One, you don't smell good. Two, it's bad for your health. Shows a lack of self-control. And this frequent drinking one, I think, is a big red flag. If you're dating someone and they drink regularly, I think that, I'm not a fan of drinking and dating. I think you've got to be really careful. It dulls your senses. It puts you in circumstances that are less than ideal as you're trying to discern if this is someone you want to marry. And the hope will be is that both of you are able to be in your right mind enough to not make mistakes that could jeopardize your future. I think drinking is a big one. Making sure that the person has virtue when it comes to how much they drink and how they drink, and ideally not really drinking much with you when you're dating. That's really important, and this swings both ways. Women and men can be guilty of how we try to just relax and have fun. Okay, so another deal breaker for me, and I've shared this before on Trending, I had to date and marry a Catholic. That was non-negotiable for me. I admire and respect a lot of people who will date people who are not Catholic, but I think that if you're going to date someone who's not Catholic, that person has to be someone who is humble and seeking after truth, is supportive of your faith, doesn't become jealous of your faith. I think there are a lot of things that need to qualify that if you're not going to date a Catholic. But again, for me, that was a game changer. Another thing is that you have to be in a similar conversation on the same page. Like, if the person that I was dating wasn't on the same page about saving sex for marriage, that was a big no. If the person I was dating didn't believe in fidelity in marriage and that marriage was permanent, that was a no for me. Okay, so now some of the more like ridiculous ones, you'll get a little glimpse into me. Okay, what are deal breakers? Bad hygiene. No. If you have bad hygiene, I'm sorry, you wouldn't even make it to a first date, okay? That means regularly brushing your teeth at least 2 times a day. That means flossing. If you need to dye, bleach, color treat your teeth to make them white again, do that. Okay. Also, messiness. I don't do messiness. Sometimes, I'll look at some of my friends. I'm like, how did you marry him? Do you know that you chose him? I know this is terrible, but, really working on being organized and not messy. I think this is why some people really appreciate military men who can be pretty clean and organized and orderly. I see the appreciation because discipline is good within marriage. Again, I don't know how some people marry their spouses. My poor husband, I'm such everything needs to be tidy. Everything always needs to be put away. Having a child, I knew I had to prepare for because it was going to be mess galore. And actually, I was having a little bit of a panic over the mess in my house because I have a child and we're starting to get ready to move. Okay, so, and then one more, a little more serious thing that's a deal breaker. If he's a liar, dump him. Absolutely dump him. If he wants to get you back, he must prove outside of a relationship that he can tell the truth. Okay, a couple comments coming in. Okay, let's see. Simply Mary on deal breaker. She says, a deal breaker for me is how a man treats other people. For example, how do they treat someone who is homeless or a need. If they're not kind to people, well then bye. Great. That's a really good example. How does he treat other people? Is he respectful? Is he thoughtful? Whether it be lowly, in all situations and contexts, or is he, someone who's fake, who's just pretending to be a good guy, but really you see how he interacts with others and you're like, yeah, it's a no for me, dog. Really great comments and thoughts. Again, if you have a comment, question, it's Gentleman's Hour. Would love to take your questions you otherwise perhaps wanted to but didn't quite feel comfortable asking your mom or sister. The number is 1-888-914-9149, or you can ask live now on Instagram at Timmerie. That's Timmerie. Okay, more questions coming in. Okay, what's the best way, Patrick's asking this, what's the best way to let someone know to let someone you're dating, but not seriously in a relationship, to tell them it's not going to work? Like, do you actually say, hey, it's not going to work? Yeah, I think it's really simple. If you're dating someone and you're just not into them, please, men, women, end it. It's one thing to give someone a chance, but within 2 or 3 dates, you should have an idea if you're interested in actually still dating this person. And if you're not, stop with the BS of saying, I think that I can keep giving them a chance, but they're really nice and I feel bad saying no. You are stringing them along. You are preventing them from meeting their next spouse. And this is really, really important, that you are literally saying, hey, it's not going to work out. Hey, you can even say something you admire about them. Hey, you're a great person, but sorry, I don't think we are compatible. Whatever you have to do, whatever you actually think, as long as you can say it nicely, share it with them. It's simple. I think sometimes we overcomplicate that. Okay, deal breaker. Lucas just commented, if someone doesn't have a cool profile song on MySpace, that is a total joke. Who still has MySpace? Maybe that should be a deal breaker if someone's still talking about MySpace. I'm just saying. That does remind me, the question you asked, what would be a deal breaker? If the person was not pro-life, I could not do that. Like, if someone was not pro-life, if they thought abortion was okay, no way. And if once I shared with them that contraception functions as an abortifacient, if they were still okay with contraception, if you're that dumb to actually still stand by that position, even though the biomedical science is there to prove that it is an abortion, I'm sorry. And I don't mean to be mean, but if you can't see that and understand through proof that that's the taking of a human life via abortion, as well as hormonal contraception, that's one of the ways contraception functions, it's a no for me. So there are a couple more no's. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie again. Any question goes. Lots of questions about relationships. Let's see. We'll come back taking more of your questions. We're also going to talk a little bit about the NCAA and Leah Thomas and everything surrounding Bruce Jenner, testosterone, you name it. But it's Gentleman's Hour. And one of the questions I have for you, and I am fascinated by this, with women's sports being destroyed by men unfairly being allowed to play sports with women, it makes me wonder what male spaces have been taken over or infringed upon by women, and which ones would you like back, and tell me why. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. Love to hear from you. Thank you to our longtime sponsor, Solidarity Health Share. Enroll now in Solidarity One, a new program with expanded options to fit any healthcare budget. Solidarity One offers access to prescription drugs and new discounts for seniors. Learn more about this exciting new healthcare at CatholicHealthShare.com.
Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
It's a Gentleman's Hour on Trending. Any question goes, questions you otherwise wouldn't feel comfortable asking your mom or sister perhaps, but you really want to know, especially about women. Tons of fun questions, and one of them coming back to the question, what was a deal breaker for me when I was dating? It made me laugh really hard because on Instagram, Exasis commented saying, it was a deal breaker for them if the other person allowed any dogs inside the house. Now, I'm not a big pet person. I'm actually okay with totally outdoor dogs, and they need to do their business in a more sanitary way. This is why we need to have dirt again. I grew up with a dog, believe it or not, and I loved our dog growing up, just so you know. So for all those people who think I'm an absolute animal hater and I receive hate mail from you, trust me, we get it and we see it. There is a visceral reaction when I talk about dogs. And little did I know that I would be literally standing at my window because my baby girl loves dogs. I would have the window open in like 5-degree weather and I'd be barking out the window at the dog across the street so it would come to the fence because she just goes mad with joy when she sees these dogs. So I appreciate dogs. They just belong outside in their natural habitat. And yes, we've domesticated them, but still, let dogs be dogs again. Why do we have to make dogs like people? They are not your children. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to get in trouble here. I'm backpedaling because I have fantastic questions coming our way. But before we go there, I do want to hear your thoughts on this question, especially in light of a lot of the transgender crisis surrounding women's sports today. It's making me wonder, as women sports are now being dominated and men are now allowed to play in women's sports, it makes me wonder, in light of the feminist revolution, what spaces that were primarily only occupied by men, what spaces, gentlemen, do you wish you had back that they could actually just be male spaces, male events, and why? I'd love to hear from you. The number's 1-888-914-9149, or you can comment live now on Instagram. Follow me at Timmerie. That's Timmerie. Fascinating responses coming in. But all of this is relevant as we've been talking about the NCAA conversation, the governing body of sports bodies, especially recently the conversation surrounding college level swimming for women. We know Will Thomas, who is a man and who competed as a man at Pennsylvania University for 3 years, suddenly is taking testosterone suppressors as well as taking cross-sex hormones, and now he's allowed to compete with the women. You see this guy, he's in a bathing suit. He is a man. He does not look like a woman in a woman's bathing suit. Some people might argue that some women don't look like women in women's bathing suits either, but that's not what I'm talking about here. This guy is a total dude. And someone commented to me yesterday, like, this has to be a joke. He's just trying to make a joke of the whole thing. Unfortunately, I don't think he is, because he's literally taking cross-sex hormones and testosterone supporters, and you don't just do that for over a year and have to be able to prove it to the sports league in order to play. But what's interesting is, that Olympian who used to be known as Bruce Jenner, who now identifies as Caitlyn Jenner, who I offend people all the time because I still insist on calling him Bruce Jenner because we can't forget his past. This man was incredibly strong, incredibly talented athletically, and he's even commented, even though he identifies as a woman, the LGBTQ movement cannot stand him. He's commented a few things I think are really important this week. He said that even with a current testosterone level, after having been tested, having your testosterone suppressed, that both himself as well as people such as Leah Thomas, who is actually a man, when they compete against women, they're absolutely going to have an unfair advantage and still win. Bruce Jenner, who now calls himself Caitlyn Jenner, has even said that he declined playing when invited to play in women's sports teams because he says, quote, "I don't think it's fair." He says he still, even with cross-sex hormones, even with a sex change, still has an unfair advantage. And he said one thing that I think is very important as well, that I don't care about how much testosterone you have right now. For example, Leah Thomas, formerly known as Will Thomas, competing with the boys and losing, by the way, for years. He didn't win until he competed against women. Well, just because he's been taking cross-sex hormones for a little while, he said, I don't care about what his testosterone level is now. What I care about is the reality of what his testosterone level has been for years and what's normal for his bodies. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie here on Relevant Radio. We'll continue to cover the NCAA story, especially as we head into the Olympics, and I do believe we'll see more of this conversation surrounding the fairness of men playing in women's sports. It's not fair. I don't care what sort of chemical you take or what sex change you engage in. It's not fair. But it has made me think, and gentlemen, it's your hour. Would love to hear from you. What men's spaces do you wish could be actually taken back by men, and why, that women have really stepped into in light of the sexual revolution? Numbers 1-888-914-9149. And if you want to comment live on Instagram, I would love to share your comment live. You can follow me at Timmerie, that's Timmerie, to share your comment live now. Okay, we have a number of comments coming in. Oh, one of them's from John from Las Vegas, sharing one of the spaces he wishes was men only again. John, where do you believe should be a male only space, and why? John, are you there? We'd love to hear from you. Oh, I think you're muted. Okay, we'll try to get John back because he had a comment about firehouses, which I think is fascinating for firefighters. But one that came up is Boy Scouts. Boy Scouts should be a male-only place again. I completely agree with that. And this is why I wanted to hear your why. So not only do you need to say what spaces should be allowed to be male-only again, but tell me why. And this is really important because Boy Scouts is where boys could learn how to be young men. Excellent response online. Perhaps you have a space that should be allowed to be male only again. One of the spaces that I was thinking of, and this has been a hard one for me. So if you know, I'm a total tomboy. I love being outside, love getting dirty, love, all kinds of stuff. We're in the process of buying a piece of property, and I'm so excited to be so close to nature and to do, stuff with the dirt again. Anyways, I was thinking about this because over the last couple of years since I've gotten married, I love camping. Like, I could go and camp for a couple weeks without a shower, okay? Maybe that's a deal breaker for you. That's okay. Anyway, so my husband loves to camp as well. And so I'm always really bummed when he wants to go camping with his dude friends. So I'm like, I want to go too. But I also know and respect that men need to be able to have guy time, need to be able to have camping trips without that one female always having to go too because she likes to do what the dudes do. There's a time and place for that, but there's also a balance. And so when we talk about perhaps, yes, we need to allow for male spaces to occur yet again, there's a balance. Yes, women should be able to do things they would like to do with men, fun activities such as camping, but there also needs to be times yet again where men can just enjoy their activities and have some time together. And as I speak of very often, unfortunately, unfortunately, many men grow a lot, not just when challenged by women, but when challenged and encouraged by other men as well. And so I think it's very important for men to grow in that way. Okay, more comments and questions. I am interested. Were we able to get John back from Las Vegas about firefighting? Okay, so he said, and I didn't get to hear his why, but he said, I'd like to see firehouses with only men again. He said he was a retired firefighter. I didn't get to hear his reason why. I hope he'll call back. But this is another one I do respect because many firehouses are overnight sleeping accommodations. And grant, yes, you can have female quarters and male quarters, but this goes back to my whole problem of women in the military and some of the challenges of women in combat specifically and the environments that you're put in. I think that we do need to have respect, especially in cases of war or physical defending where, there is that respect in terms of sleeping arrangements. And yes, they're respected, but, not to just make it the boys' club, but for allowing men to do men's things. Okay, Lawrence in Bellflower is calling, and he has a comment about men only on submarines. Okay, Lawrence, tell me why submarines and why you think it should be men only.
Well, and good afternoon. I can only speak on behalf of the branch of the military that I served in, and just because of the general nature of the quarters, and then if you have to have gender separation for people serving, you're giving up so much space for one or two, say, females that could be occupied by a dozen or more men, if that makes sense. Birthing, sleeping areas, whatnot.
Right. Yeah, that does make sense. So this is just a simple logistics element that with limited space in a submarine, if you have men and women, that would actually cause a problem just in terms of actually being able to separate out those quarters in a healthy and safe way.
Exactly. And then that affects mission effectiveness. I think that there's plenty of females that I encountered in my career in the military that worked at squadron, worked on the docks, but I think it's just it doesn't work. It's not logistically practical, I guess would be a good way to put it.
Great. I appreciate your thoughts because I do think that sometimes we don't even think about the reality of sometimes it's just impractical to put people in those circumstances. And you do bring up a good point. Even when you're in a mission, I do have a problem with women being side by side with people, with men in combat. That's actually a whole nother topic for another gentleman's hour. Should women be allowed to fight in combat side by side with men? I think that it messes with men's instincts. It leads men to have to be desensitized to that natural instinct to protect women. And I don't think that's okay. We have these natural born instincts that are important and gifts as men and gifts as women. So great comment and thought, Lawrence. I really appreciate that. And we're going to have to dive into that combat question one of these days. Very controversial. Talk about a topic that will rouse some feathers here. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie today on Relevant Radio. I want to take some more questions that have been coming in. This one is really interesting. Let's see. A couple more. Again, if you have a question, it's not too late to ask. The number is 1-888-914-9149. Or you can also ask live now on Instagram. I'd be happy to take it. Follow me at Timmerie is my handle, Timmerie. Okay, the next question is from Marco. How does a woman jump right into having kids when a man has fear surrounding the pressure to have everything in place first? This is a great question because this appeals to what we were just talking about. Nature, gifts, our God-given roles and responsibilities and things that are just built right into us. It tends to be that men want to have all the finances in order. They want to have the house in order. They want to have all of these things prepared. They want to have a certain income level, a certain type of job. And so sometimes when the idea of having a child or suddenly, hey, honey, we're pregnant comes up, you don't react that well as men. And sometimes perhaps you're even shocked at what may seem to you the irrational excitement on the part of the woman, as if nothing matters. Here we are, we have this new life, and we're so excited to embrace the new life that's coming. Well, might I appeal for just a moment yet again to the great gifts of women and men? The gifts of women to nurture, to physically grow and develop a child within their body, to physically nourish that child. A woman has the capacity to do so much for her child, to care for that child naturally through things such as growing and the 9 months it takes to develop that human being to come out of the womb as developed as the baby is. And also for the capacity to even know that you can feed your own child with your own body. There's a lot of confidence to think, I do have what I need to care for this human being. But there's also this gift, this natural instinct in women that when we are pregnant, to be more dependent upon our family, our spouse, but also our extended family. There are pheromones and hormones working within our body that lead us to be more interested in those people who are familiar to us, who are safe, who will care for us. This is why there's something wrong with taking hormonal contraception, because it puts the body in a state of pseudo-pregnancy. So your pheromones are working improperly, whereas normally you'd be looking for a mate and someone to be with who would be a healthier person for you to be with. But when you're in a state of pseudo-pregnancy on contraception, your body's looking for someone who's similar to you. So you tend to make poor decisions in terms of who you will date on many levels, and even all the way down to genetic compatibility. It's fascinating. And so why do I say this? Because we as women also have, although there can be many worries when pregnant about caring, we also have this instinct to know that there will be people who will care for us and provide for us. That's why it's a travesty as a culture when women don't believe this and feel as if their only option is abortion, because that's not the natural go-to that we have as women when we're pregnant. Our bodies are working to tell us everything's okay. We'll be taken care of. I have the capacity to take care of my child, and other people will help me to care for me and my child as necessary. That's how it works. There's an incredible book called Love and Economics by Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse. And she talks about how it takes a mom being able to care for her child and not have to worry, because a father can then be there to help take care of her so that she can take care of that child. So how does this come back to men? Men are wired for providing and protecting. And you wish that you could have the perfect circumstances to provide and protect. But the reality is the world doesn't always offer us perfect circumstances at the perfect timing, at the perfect income level. And so if you're struggling because you're feeling pressure about having kids, or pressure because you find out you're having another child, and how is it that your wife or a woman can jump so easily into starting to have kids, or the idea of it, or having another, it's because we have so much built into our bodies to nourish a human being. But you two men have an incredible capacity to also provide and protect us. We don't always have to have all the external things perfectly in place to have those provisions. And I do know, and I think this is so important, people have said it many times before, there are old proverbs that say this, that with every new child comes a loaf of bread underneath that baby's arms. In other words, God always provides as your family grows. I've seen this in my own life. God blessed us with so many things as we found out that we were having our baby girl, as we were approaching her birth, and the months, even years since her birth. God has provided in abundance. If we are faithful, if we understand the great gift of life, and if we are open to that gift of life, we will have what we need. And you as a man will be equipped with what is necessary. Thank you for joining me this Gentleman's Hour. It's been a blast. Join me again tomorrow for our Marriage Hour. We're actually also going to be talking about the metaverse and the future of the digital reality that we may be facing. What do you think about the metaverse? Will you be living in it? Yes? No? This is Timmerie from Trending with Timmerie. Joining me Thursday on Trending will be the world's foremost technology addiction expert, Dr. Nicholas Kardaras. He's an Ivy League educated psychologist, and he has a lot to say about the metaverse and our future of these cyber profiles, cyber reality, ultra parallel universe. It's also Marriage Hour, so join me Thursday at 6 p.m. Central on Relevant Radio or the Relevant Radio app.